The Hunchback of Notre-Dame. The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, French, Notre-Dame de Paris, lit. Our Lady of Paris, originally titled Notre-Dame de Paris, 1482, is a French Gothic novel by Victor Hugo, published in 1831. The novel has been described as a key text in French literature, and has been adapted for film over a dozen times, as well as numerous television and stage adaptations, such as a 1923 silent film with Lon Chaney, a 1939 sound film with Charles Laughton, and a 1996 Disney animated film. The novel sought to preserve values of French culture in a time period of great change, which resulted in the destruction of many French Gothic structures and threatened to trivialize the vibrancy of 15th-century France. The novel made Notre-Dame de Paris a national icon and served as a catalyst into a renewed interest in the restoration of Gothic form. Title: the novel's original French title, Notre-Dame de Paris, refers to Notre Dame Cathedral, on which the story is centered. Frederick Chaubrel's 1833 English translation was published as The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, which became the generally used title in English, which refers to Quasimodo, Notre Dame's bell ringer. Background: Victor Hugo began writing Notre Dame de Paris in 1829, largely to make his contemporaries more aware of the value of the Gothic architecture, which was neglected and often destroyed to be replaced by new buildings or defaced by replacement of parts of buildings in a newer style. For instance, the medieval stained glass panels of Notre Dame de Paris had been replaced by white glass to let more light into the church. This explains the large descriptive sections of the book, which far exceed the requirements of the story. A few years earlier, Hugo had already published a paper entitled Guerre aux Demolisseurs, War to the Demolishers, specifically aimed at saving Paris medieval architecture. The agreement with his original publisher, Gosselin, was that the book would be finished that same year, but Hugo was constantly delayed due to the demands of other projects. In the summer of 1830, Gosselin demanded that Hugo complete the book by February 1831. Beginning in September 1830, Hugo worked non-stop on the project thereafter. Plot: the story is set in Paris in 1482 during the reign of Louis Roman XI. The gypsy Romani Esmeralda, born as Agnes, captures the hearts of many men, including those of Captain Phoebus and Pierre Gringoir, but especially Quasimodo and his guardian Archdeacon Claude Frollo. Frollo is torn between his obsessive lust for Esmeralda and the rules of Notre Dame Cathedral. He orders Quasimodo to kidnap her, but Quasimodo is captured by Phoebus and his guards, who save Esmeralda. Gringoir, who attempted to help Esmeralda but was knocked out by Quasimodo, is about to be hanged by beggars when Esmeralda saves him by agreeing to marry him for 4 years. The following day, Quasimodo is sentenced to be flogged and turned on the pillory for 2 hours, followed by another hour's public exposure. He calls for water. Esmeralda, seeing his thirst, approaches the public stocks and offers him a drink of water. It saves him, and she captures his heart. Later, Esmeralda is arrested and charged with the attempted murder of Phoebus, whom Frollo attempted to kill in jealousy after seeing him trying to seduce Esmeralda. She is sentenced to death by hanging. As she is being led to the gallows, Quasimodo swings down by the bell rope of Notre Dame and carries her off to the cathedral, temporarily protecting her under the law of sanctuary from arrest. Frollo later informs Gringoire that the Court of Parliament has voted to remove Esmeralda's right to the sanctuary, so she can no longer seek shelter in the cathedral and will be taken away to be killed. Clopin, the leader of the Roma, hears the news from Gringoire and rallies the citizens of Paris to charge the cathedral and rescue Esmeralda. When Quasimodo sees the Roma, He assumes they are there to hurt Esmeralda, so he drives them off. Likewise, he thinks the king's men want to rescue her, and tries to help them find her. She is rescued by Frollo and Gringoir. But, after yet another failed attempt to win her love, Frollo betrays Esmeralda by handing her to the troops and watches while she is being hanged. When Frollo laughs during Esmeralda's hanging, Quasimodo pushes him from the height of Notre-Dame to his death. With nothing left to live for, Quasimodo vanishes, and is never seen again. In the original, Quasimodo's skeleton is found many years later in the charnel house, a mass grave into which the bodies of the destitute and criminals were indiscriminately thrown, implying that Quasimodo had sought Esmeralda among the decaying corpses and lay beside her himself to die. As the guards attempt to pull the embracing skeletons apart, his skeleton crumbles to dust. Characters. Major. Esmeralda, born Agnes, is a beautiful 16-year-old Romani street dancer who is naturally compassionate and kind. She is the novel's protagonist and the center of the human drama within the story. A popular focus of the citizens' attentions, she experiences their changeable attitudes, being first adored as an entertainer, then hated as a witch, before being lauded again by Quasimodo. She is loved by both Quasimodo and Claude Frollo, but unfortunately she falls hopelessly in love with Captain Phoebus, a handsome soldier whom she believes will rightly protect her but who simply wants to seduce her. She is one of the few characters to show Quasimodo a moment of human kindness, as when she gives him water after the hunchback's flogging. She is eventually revealed to be not a Romani by birth but to have been kidnapped by them and replaced by the deformed Quasimodo. Claude Frollo, the novel's main antagonist, is the Archdeacon of Notre-Dame. His sour attitude and his alchemical experiments have alienated him from the Parisians, who believe him to be a sorcerer. His parents died from the plague when he was a young man, leaving his dissolute younger brother Jehan as his only family, whom he unsuccessfully attempts to reform towards a better life. Frollo also helps care for Quasimodo. Frollo's numerous sins include lechery, failed alchemy, and other listed vices. His mad attraction to Esmeralda sets off a chain of events, including her attempted abduction, leading to Quasimodo's sentence to be lashed in the square, and Frollo almost murdering Phoebus in a jealous rage, leading to Esmeralda's execution. Quasimodo is a deformed 20-year-old hunchback, and the bell ringer of Notre-Dame. He is half-blind and deaf, the latter from all the years ringing the bells of the church. Abandoned by his mother as a baby, he was adopted by Claude Frollo. Quasimodo's life within the confines of the cathedral and his only two outlets ringing the bells and his love and devotion for Frollo are described. He rarely ventures outside the cathedral because the citizens of Paris despise and shun him for his appearance. The notable occasions when he does leave include taking part in the Festival of Fools, which is celebrated on January 6, during which he is elected the Pope of Fools due to his perfect hideousness, and his subsequent attempt to kidnap Esmeralda, his rescue of Esmeralda from the gallows, his attempt to bring Phoebus to Esmeralda, and his final abandonment of the cathedral at the end of the novel. It is revealed in the story that the baby Quasimodo was left by the Roma in place of Esmeralda, whom they abducted. Pierre Gringoir is a struggling poet. He mistakenly finds his way into the court of miracles, the domain of the Truands beggars. In order to preserve the secrecy, Gringoir must either be killed by hanging or marry a Romani. Although Esmeralda does not love him, and in fact believes him to be a coward rather than a true man, she takes pity on his plight and marries him. But, because she is already in love with Phoebus, much to his disappointment, she will not let him touch her. Phoebus de Châteaupers is the captain of the king's archers, and a minor antagonist in the novel. After he saves Esmeralda from abduction, she becomes infatuated with him, and he is intrigued by her. Already betrothed to the beautiful but spiteful Fleur-de-Lis, he wants to lie with Esmeralda nonetheless, but is prevented when Frollo stabs him. Phoebus survives, but Esmeralda is taken to be the attempted assassin by all, including Phoebus himself, who no longer wants her. He is condemned to a miserable married life with Fleur-de-Lis. Minor. Clopin Trouillefou is the king of truands. He sentences Gringoir to be hanged, and presides over his wedding to Esmeralda. He rallies the Court of Miracles to rescue Esmeralda from Notre-Dame after the idea is suggested by Gringoir. He is eventually killed during the attack by the king's soldiers. Duke of Egypt is Esmeralda's protector and second in command of the truands. He knows of her past and gave her an amulet to help find her mother. He is last seen during the riot at Notre Dame to rescue Esmeralda. Jehan Frollo du Moulin, literally of the mill, translated in Latin as Joannes Frollo de Molendino, is Claude Frollo's 16-year-old dissolute younger brother. He is a troublemaker and a student at the university. He is dependent on his brother for money, which he then proceeds to squander on alcohol. After his brother stops giving him money, Jehan becomes rogue. When he joins Clopin and his beggars to raid the cathedral, he briefly enters the cathedral by ascending one of the towers with a borrowed ladder. Afterwards he sees Quasimodo and tries to shoot an arrow at the hunchback's eye, but Quasimodo throws him down to his death. Fleur-de-Lis de Gondelaurier is a beautiful and wealthy noblewoman engaged to Phoebus. Phoebus's attentions to Esmeralda make her insecure and jealous, and she and her friends respond by treating Esmeralda with contempt and spite. Fleur-de-Lis later neglects to inform Phoebus that Esmeralda has not been executed, which serves to deprive the pair of any further contact, though, as Phoebus no longer lusts after Esmeralda by this time. This does not matter. The novel ends with their wedding, but they are said to be condemned to an unhappy marriage. Madame Aloys de Gondelaurier is Fleur-de-Lis' mother. Sister Gudule, also known as Sachet and formerly named Paquet Guibertot la Chantefleurie, is an anchoress who lives in seclusion in an exposed cell in central Paris. She is tormented by the loss of her daughter Agnes, whom she believes to have been cannibalized by the Roma as a baby, and devotes her life to mourning her. Her long-lost daughter turns out to be Esmeralda, a fact she discovers only moments before Esmeralda is hanged. Gudule is accidentally killed by one of the king's soldiers while attempting to prevent them from taking her daughter. Jolly is Esmeralda's pet goat. In addition to dancing with Esmeralda, Jolly can do tricks for money, such as tell time, spell Phoebus' name, and do impressions of public figures. Later during Esmeralda's trial, when Esmeralda is falsely accused of the stabbing of Phoebus, Jolly is falsely accused of being the devil in disguise. In the end of the novel, Jolly is saved by Gringoir, who has become fond of the goat during his marriage to Esmeralda after Esmeralda is captured and hanged. Louis Roman XI is the King of France. He appears as an old and sick man, but his personality is very sly and Machiavellian, as well as self-centered. He appears briefly when he is brought the news of the rioting at Notre Dame. He orders his guard to kill the rioters, and also the witch Esmeralda, because of being misinformed about the reason of rioting. Tristan l'Hermite is a friend of King Louis Roman XI. He leads the band that goes to capture Esmeralda. Henriette Cousin is the city executioner, who hangs Esmeralda. Florian Barbedienne is the judge who presides over Quasimodo's case for kidnapping Esmeralda. He is also deaf, which makes it more difficult because when he asks Quasimodo for his name, age and profession, Quasimodo does not respond. He sentences the hunchback to be tortured in the public square, 1 hour of flogging for attempted kidnap, and another hour of public disgrace after he thought Quasimodo was mocking him. Jacques Charmolue is Claude Frollo's friend in charge of torturing prisoners. He gets Esmeralda to falsely confess to killing Phoebus. He then has her imprisoned. Jacques Coppenole is a man who appears in the beginning of the novel as one of the Flemish guests at the Feast of Fools. He convinces the Parisians to select the Pope of Fools. Pierre Torterue is the torturer at the chaplet. He tortures Esmeralda after her interrogation to the point in where he hurts her so badly she falsely confesses, sealing her own fate. He was also the official who administered the savage flogging to which Quasimodo was sentenced by Barbedian. The unnamed magistrate is the one who presides over Esmeralda's case after she is falsely accused of stabbing Phoebus. He forces her to confess to the crime and sentences her to be hanged in the gallows. Robin Pascipane is Jehan Frollo's companion, who appears with him during the Feast of Fools and Quasimodo's flogging in the public square. Olivier le Mauvais, literally Olivier the Evil, is King Louis Roman XI's close advisor. La Fallardel is the innkeeper of the hotel where Phoebus and Esmeralda meet. Marc Senane is a magician Jacques Charmolue and Claude Frollo torture for practicing witchcraft while they try to pry alchemy secrets from him. Béranger de Champchevrier is Fleur de Lis's friend. Jacques Coictier is King Louis Roman XI's physician. Robert d'Estouteville is the chamberlain, King Louis Roman XI. He is in a bad temper the day Quasimodo is pilloried, and he does not realize Quasimodo and the judge on duty are both deaf. Colombe is Fleur de Lis's friend. Lambert Hochmunt is a German scholar who, at the beginning of the novel, is tormented by Jehan Frollo and Robin Pascipane. Major themes. The novel's original French title, Notre-Dame de Paris, indicates that the cathedral itself is the most significant aspect of the novel, both the main setting and the focus of the story's themes. The building had fallen into disrepair at the time of writing, which was something Hugo felt strongly about. The book portrays the Romantic era as one of extremes in architecture, passion, and religion. The theme of determinism, fate, and destiny, as set up in the preface of the novel through the introduction of the word ananke, is explored, as well as revolution and social strife. Architecture. Architecture is a major concern of Hugo's in Notre-Dame de Paris, not just as embodied in the cathedral itself, but as representing throughout Paris and the rest of Europe an artistic genre which, Hugo argued, was about to disappear with the arrival of the printing press. Claude Frollo's portentous phrase, "Cecitura celavis will kill that," as he looks from a printed book to the cathedral building, sums up this thesis, which is expounded on in Book V, Chapter 2. Hugo writes that quiconque nascent poet si facet architect, whoever was born a poet became an architect, arguing that while the written word was heavily censored and difficult to reproduce, architecture was extremely prominent and enjoyed considerable freedom. With the recent introduction of the printing press, it became possible to reproduce one's ideas much more easily on paper, and Hugo considered this period to represent the last flowering of architecture as a great art form. With many of his books, Hugo was interested in a time that seemed to him to be on the cusp of two types of society. The major theme of the third book is that over time, the cathedral has been repaired, but the repairs and additions have made the cathedral worse, and who put the cold, white panes in the place of those windows, and who substituted for the ancient Gothic altar, splendidly encumbered with shrines and reliquaries, that heavy marble sarcophagus, with angels' heads and clouds, are a few examples of this. This chapter also discusses how, after repairs to the cathedral after the French Revolution, there was not a significant style in what was added. It seems as if the new architecture is now uglier and worse than it was before the repair. Literary significance and reception. Hugo introduced with this work the concept of the novel as epic theatre, a giant epic about the history of a whole people, incarnated in the figure of the great cathedral as witness and silent protagonist of that history, and the whole idea of time and life as an ongoing, organic panorama centered on dozens of characters caught in the middle of that history. It is the first novel to have beggars as protagonists. A significant aspect of Notre-Dame de Paris is that it encompasses the whole of life, from the King of France to Paris sewer rats, in a manner later co-opted by Honore de Balzac, Gustave Flaubert, and many others, including Charles Dickens. The enormous popularity of the book in France spurred the nascent historical preservation movement in that country and strongly encouraged Gothic revival architecture. Ultimately, it led to major renovations at Notre Dame in the 19th century led by Eugene Viollet-le-Duc. Much of the cathedral's present appearance is a result of this renovation. Allusions and references. Allusions to actual history, geography, and current science. In The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Victor Hugo makes frequent reference to the architecture of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. He also mentions the invention of the printing press, when the bookmaker near the beginning of the work speaks of the German pest. In 2010, British archivist Adrian Glue discovered references to a real-life hunchback who was a foreman of a government sculpting studio in Paris in the 1820s, who worked on post-revolution restorations to the cathedral. Allusions in other works. The name Quasimodo has become synonymous with a courageous heart beneath a grotesque exterior. Drama adaptations. To date, all of the film and TV adaptations have strayed somewhat from the original plot, some going as far as to give it a happy ending, including in the classic 1939 film, although Quasimodo loses Esmeralda to Gringoir in this version. The 1956 French film is one of the few versions to end almost exactly like the novel, although it changes other sections of the story. Unlike most adaptations, the 1996 Disney version has an ending that is inspired by an opera created by Hugo himself. Comics. Artists like Noel Glosner, Andrew Dixon, Robin Recht, Tim Conrad, Gilbert Bloch, George Evans, Dick Briefer have all created comic strip and book adaptations of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Paulo Borges, Gustavo Machado, and Dan Spiegel have drawn comic strip versions based on the 1996 Disney movie adaptation. Films. Esmeralda, a 1905 French short silent film. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a 1911 silent film. The Darling of Paris, a 1917 silent film. Esmeralda, a 1922 British silent film. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1923 silent film starring Lon Chaney as Quasimodo, directed by Wallace Worsley, and produced by Carl Liemel and Irving Thalberg. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, 1939 sound film starring Charles Laughton as Quasimodo and Maureen O'Hara as Esmeralda, directed by William Dieterle, and produced by Pandro S. Berman. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a 1956 French film starring Anthony Quinn as Quasimodo and Gina Lollobrigida as Esmeralda, directed by Jean Delanoy and produced by Raymond Hakim and Robert Hackham. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a 1986 Australian-American fantasy animated film. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, a 1996 animated film by Walt Disney Pictures, directed by Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale and produced by Don Hahn. The Hunchback of Notre Dame Roman II, a sequel of the 1996 Disney movie. The Secret of the Hunchback, an animated film. A Golden Films animated film. A Jetlag Productions animated film. a Dingo Pictures animated film. Quasimodo del Paris, a 1999 parody film. Disney has announced a live-action version of their 1996 animated film is in development. Television: The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, a 1966 miniseries. The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, a 1977 miniseries. The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, a 1982 British-American television film starring Anthony Hopkins as Quasimodo, Leslie Ann Down as Esmeralda, and Derek Jacobi as Frollo, directed by Michael Tuchner and Alan Hume and produced by Norman Rosemont and Malcolm J. Christopher. The Magical Adventures of Quasimodo, 1996 animated series. The Hunchback, a 1997 television film starring Mandy Patinkin as Quasimodo, Salma Hayek as Esmeralda, and Richard Harris as Frollo. Idris Elba is slated to not only play the title character, but also to direct and produce music for a modern retelling to be broadcast on Netflix. Theater. In 1861, a grand burlesque extravaganza by Henry J. Byron, Esmeralda, or The Sensation Goat, presented at the Royal Strand Theatre in London on 28 September 1861. The piece was revived in 1871 at the same venue, with Harry Palton as Quasimodo and Rose Cullen as Esmeralda. The program warned that the burlesque was founded on, but not to be confounded with, the romance, the opera, and the ballet. In 1977, an adaptation by Ken Hill was commissioned and staged by the National Theatre in London. In 1978, an adaptation by Robert Hossein opened in Paris. In 1997, an adaptation for the stage by Nicolas de Beaubion opened in Paris. In 2010, an adaptation by Pip Utton was staged at the Pleasance as part of the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. In 2010, an original adaptation by Myriad Theatre and Film was staged in London and then toured South England. In 2012, an adaptation by Belt Up Theatre was staged in Selby Abbey. In 2013, an adaptation by James Villafuerte was staged in Tanghalang Pasiguino Villa Teatro. In 2019, an adaptation by Benjamin Pallia was staged by Iris Theatre Company at St. Paul's Church, Covent Garden, London. Music. 1977 lush orchestral disco 28-minute epic retelling the tale of Quasimodo and Esmeralda by Alec R. Costandinos and the Symphonic Orchestra. The Hunchback of Notre-Dame Dennis DeYoung album, a 1996 recording of music written by Styx singer Dennis DeYoung for his musical adaptation of the novel. The Hunchback of Notre-Dame soundtrack for the 1996 Disney film. A 2016 soundtrack to the musical adaptation based on the novel and songs from the Disney film version. Musical theater. La Esmeralda, opera by Louise Burton 1836. Libretto by Victor Hugo. Esmeralda, opera by Alexander Dargomishsky 1847 based on the Victor Hugo novel. In 1864, an opera by William Henry Fry with libretto by his brother Joseph Rees Fry based on the Victor Hugo novel. First performance, Academy of Music, Philadelphia, 4 May 1864, conducted by Theodore Thomas. Esmeralda, opera by Arthur Goring Thomas 1883, also based on the same Victor Hugo novel. Notre-Dame, romantic opera in 2 acts by Franz Schmidt, text after Victor Hugo by Schmidt and Leopold Wilk, composed 1902-4, first perf. Vienna 1914. In 1993, an off-Broadway musical with music by Byron Janis, lyrics by Hal Hacketty, and book by Anthony Scully. In 1993, a dramatic sung-through musical with book and lyrics by Gary Sullivan and music by John Trent Wallace. After a production at the Mermaid Theatre in London, it was published by Samuel French Limited in 1997 and has received several UK productions as well as productions in New Zealand and Australia. In 2010 it was rewritten as a conventional musical with the new title Notre-Dame. El Jorobado de Paris 1993, an Argentinian sung-through musical with book and lyrics by Pepe Cibrian Campoy and music by Angel Mahler. Revised versions opened in 1995, 2006, and 2013. An operatic melodrama by Zygmunt Leapins based on the novel. In 1998, Notre-Dame de Paris with music by Ricardo Coxiant and lyrics by Luc Plamondon premiered in Paris and became an instant success. From 1999 to 2002, the Disney film was adapted into a darker, more Gothic musical production called Der Glockner von Notre-Dame, translated in English as The Bellringer of Notre Dame in Berlin. A cast recording was also recorded in German. The musical premiered in the United States in 2014. A rock musical version was released in Seattle, Washington in 1998 titled Hunchback with music and script by C. Rainey Louise. A musical version, scored by Dennis DeYoung, opened in Chicago at the Bailiwick Repertory in the summer of 2008. A re-adaptation of the piece entitled Our Lady of Paris, with music and lyrics by David Levinson and book by Stacy Weingarten, was produced in a reading format in Manhattan. It resets the action to 1954 at the beginning of the French-Algerian conflict. After the first reading, the piece underwent revisions. A second reading was produced in January 2011 under the musical's new title, Les Enfants de Paris. Ballet. La Esmeralda 1844, choreography by Jules Parrot, music by Césaire Pugny. First performed at Her Majesty's Theatre in London. The ballet has a long performance history in Russia via the revivals of the choreographer Marius Petipa, St. Petersburg throughout the late 19th century. Gugul's Daughter, or Esmeralda 1902, choreography by Alexander Alexeyevich Gorsky, music by Antoine Simon. In 1965, a choreography by Roland Petit. In 1998, a choreography and direction by Michael Pink and original music score by Philip Feeney, currently in the repertoire of Milwaukee Ballet, Boston Ballet, Royal New Zealand Ballet, Atlanta Ballet, and Colorado Ballet. Ringaren I Notre-Dame, The Bellringer of Notre Dame, 2009, choreography by Per Isberg and original music score by Stefan Nilsson. First performed on Friday, April 3, by the Royal Swedish Ballet. Radio. 1934 36-part serial adaptation created by George Edwards was broadcast on Australian radio. John Carradine starred in an hour-long adaptation broadcast on a 1946 episode of Your Playhouse of Favourites. The book was twice adapted and broadcast on BBC Radio 4's classic serial. In 5 parts from 6 January to 3 February 1989, with Jack Claff as Quasimodo. In 2 parts on 30 November and 7 December 2008, with deaf actor David Bauer playing Quasimodo. Video games. Hunchback, a 1983 arcade video game developed by Century Electronics, starring Quasimodo and Esmeralda. Translation history. The Hunchback of Notre Dame has been translated into English many times. Translations are often reprinted in various imprints. Some translations have been revised over time. 1833. Translated by Frederick Schoberl as The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Later revisions. 1833. Translated by William Hazlitt as Notre Dame, A Tale of the Ancient Regime. Later revisions. 1862. Translated by Henry L. Williams as The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, 1882. Translated by A. Langdon Alger as Notre-Dame de Paris, 1888. Translated by Isabel F. Hapgood as Notre-Dame de Paris, 1892. Translated by J. Carroll Beckwith as The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, 1892. Translated by Alan Smithy, 1895. Translated by M. W. Artois et al. Part of the 28-volume novels of Victor Hugo, reprinted in the 20th century under other titles. 1956. Translated by Lowell Baer as The Hunchback of Notre-Dame for Bantam Books and included in Bantam Classics. 1964. Translated by Walter J. Cobb. In multiple editions, see for example Signet Classics, ISBN 0-451-52788-7. 1978. Translated by John Sturrock. In multiple editions, see for example Penguin Classics, ISBN 0-1444-353-3. 1993. Translated by Alban J. Krailsheimer as Notre-Dame de Paris. See Oxford World's Classics, ISBN 978-0-19-955-582. 2002. Revised translation by Catherine Liu of an anonymous 19th century translation. See Modern Library Classics, ISBN 0-679-64257-9. 2013. Translated by Anonymous Create Space Edition. 2014. Translated by P. Matvey. 2018. Translated by Andrew Primas.